The screen on the Bavar 373 radar console inside the hardened command post had been clean for almost 3 hours. Not the kind of clean that comes from inactivity, the kind of clean that makes you sit up straighter, the kind of clean that experienced radar operators learn to distrust, because in modern electronic warfare, a perfectly empty screen is not necessarily good news. It might mean nothing is out there, or it might mean something is out there that doesn't want to be seen. Heck, the operator had been watching since midnight. His unit, one of the newly upgraded Bavar 3732 batteries Iran, had quietly deployed across its northwestern air defense corridor, was running its passive detection suite in a low-emission mode. Not broadcasting. Listening. The upgraded Bavar 3732, revealed by President Pezeshkian's government just 12 months earlier, I represented the most significant leap forward in Iranian indigenous air defense technology since the original Bavar 373 first rolled out in 2019. Its independent launcher stations, each equipped with their own radar, could detect and track targets autonomously without feeding through a central node. Its engagement envelope had been stretched to 300 kilometers with the integration of the Sayed-4B missiles. It could simultaneously track 60 aerial contacts and engage 6 of them at the same time. On paper, it was the most capable thing Iran had ever built, but it was not designed for what was coming. At 2:31 in the morning, something happened that the operator would describe later as feeling less like a radar contact and more like the system itself hesitating. A flicker, a whisper, a momentary suggestion of mass moving through airspace where the mathematics said nothing should be, yet gone before he could characterize it. Then back, slightly stronger, slightly further along a track that told a story no one in that room wanted to hear. Whatever it was, it had already crossed the border. It had already been inside Iranian sovereign airspace for the better part of 40 minutes before a single instrument in the country's air defense network had registered so much as a suggestion of its existence. He picked up the phone. The mission had begun many hours earlier, and at Ovda Air Base in the southern Negev desert of Israel. This was not a location associated with routine anything. Ovda, a sprawling 1980s-era installation that sits roughly 45 kilometers north of Eilat among the rust-colored mountains of the southern Negev, had been functioning as a transit and forward operating hub for an unprecedented American military buildup that had been accelerating throughout February 2026. By the third week of that month, satellite imagery had begun telling a story that no Pentagon spokesperson was going to confirm with a press release. 11 F-22 Raptors had landed at Avda Air Base on February 25, 2026. They had departed RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom, escorted by 7 aerial refueling tankers, and covered thousands of miles to set down at an airfield in the closest American ally's backyard. Chinese commercial satellite imagery company, Mizar Vision, published annotated pictures of the aircraft within 24 hours of their arrival. Each airframe individually tagged with Chinese characters and spread across Chinese social media platforms. The world's most secretive fighter had been photographed, cataloged, and broadcast from Israel's southern desert to every defense ministry on the planet before the aircraft had even finished their maintenance cycles. Now, that irony was not lost on anyone. The F-22 Raptor is, without exaggeration, the most advanced air-to-air combat aircraft ever built and placed into operational service by any nation on Earth. It entered service in 2005. Only 195 were ever constructed. Not one has ever been sold or transferred to a foreign military, not to Britain, not to Canada, not to Japan, not to Australia, not even to Israel. A specific provision of United States law prohibits its export. The aircraft is that sensitive. The sensor fusion systems, the electronic warfare suite, the low observable architecture, the integrated avionics that allow a single pilot to simultaneously track and engage multiple targets while gathering intelligence on the electromagnetic environment around him. All of it is considered too consequential to allow beyond American sovereign possession. When 11 of these aircraft land on an Allied runway within operational distance of a regional adversary's capital, every intelligence analyst in every interested country begins revising their threat assessments immediately. The deployment to Avda was the first time F-22s had ever been positioned in Israel for possible combat operations. It was not, however, the first time F-22s had operated in Iranian airspace. That had happened 8 months earlier on the night of June 21st and 22nd, 2025, during an operation the United States military called Midnight Hammer. A Midnight Hammer deserves its own chapter in the history of American air power. The operation involved 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers departing Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, flying east for 18 continuous hours, refueling in the air 3 times, and entering Iranian airspace, escorted and preceded by a strike package that included F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning IIs. The B-2S carried the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker-busting weapon that represents the largest conventional bomb in the American arsenal, and the only conventional munition on Earth designed specifically to penetrate the kind of deeply buried, heavily reinforced underground nuclear facilities that Iran had constructed at Fordo and Natanz. 125 American aircraft participated in total, and a United States submarine launched more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Isfahan nuclear complex at the same moment the B-2s crossed into Iranian airspace. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, told reporters afterward that Iranian fighters did not fly. That Iranian surface-to-air missile systems, quote, appeared not to see the strike package. That the aircraft went in and came out and struck what they intended to strike. The American military described the damage to Iran's nuclear facilities as extremely severe. F-22s and F-35s flew into Iranian airspace on what officials described as a suppression mission, drawing out any surface-to-air fire ahead of the bombers, and according to President Trump, no launches were detected. The Bavar 373 batteries, the S-300 installations, are the Khordad 15 systems that Iran had been parading for years as capable of engaging fifth-generation aircraft. None of them successfully engaged the strike package. The Iranian Air Force, with what may have been as few as 5 to 7 airworthy F-14 Tomcats remaining at the 8th Tactical Fighter Base near Isfahan in mid-June 2025, stayed on the ground. 2 weeks after Midnight Hammer, Israeli forces struck those F-14s directly, hitting 2 airframes on the apron at Mehrabad Airport in Tehran with precision drone strikes. The footage, released by the Israeli Defense Forces, showed infrared targeting video of the aircraft being destroyed where they sat. Years of 40,000 man-hour restoration efforts, decades of improvised spare parts supply chains, generations of Iranian engineers keeping 50-year-old American aircraft flying through sanctions and isolation. All of it converted to smoke and wreckage in seconds by drones that cost a fraction of 1% of what those aircraft were worth to preserve. The age of the Persian Tomcat was ending, but Iran was not finished recalibrating. And this is where the story gets more complicated and more dangerous. In January 2026, 16 Chinese military transport aircraft landed in Iran over the course of a 56-hour period. The flights took place during a period of restricted Iranian airspace, with transponders turned off, movements masked, cargo unknown to the outside world for weeks. When the reporting began to surface through defense intelligence channels in early February 2026, the picture that emerged was significant. China had delivered to Iran its YLC-8B strategic three-dimensional long-range surveillance radar system. Possibly multiple units, the YLC-8B is not a weapon. It is something arguably more strategically important. It is a system specifically engineered to see what cannot normally be seen. Developed by the Nanjing Research Institute of Electronics Technology, it operates in the UHF frequency band, exploiting a physical property that conventional stealth design cannot fully defeat. High-frequency radars, the kind typically used by fire control systems and weapons quality tracking networks, are where stealth technology performs at its best. The shaping of fifth-generation aircraft, the radar-absorbent coatings, the carefully angled surfaces, all of these are optimized to scatter or absorb the higher frequency bands that precision engagement radars use. They are less effective against the longer wavelengths of low-frequency UHF systems, which interact differently with an aircraft's fuselage and can generate returns even from platforms designed to minimize them. Against conventional aircraft, the YLC-8B can detect targets at ranges exceeding 500 kilometers. For tactical stealth aircraft such as the F-35, effective detection has been assessed by analysts at something beyond 200 kilometers, with some reports suggesting up to 350 kilometers for certain target profiles. For ballistic missiles in their boost phase, the system's detection envelope may extend to 700 kilometers. The antenna is a massive foldable array requiring fewer than 30 minutes for a six-person crew to deploy and recover. The entire system is road transportable, meaning it can be repositioned before an adversary can target its known location. Once detected by the YLC-8B, target data can be fed into the Integrated Air Defense Network, decoupling the Bavar 3732 batteries and the Russian-supplied S-300 PMU, two systems with enough warning time to begin engagement sequences before attacking aircraft reach their weapons release points. The implications of this transfer rippled across every planning cell in the region. The YLC-8B does not give Iran the ability to shoot down an F-22 or an F-35. Detection and destruction are separated by an enormous operational gap that Iran has not yet closed. But detection changes geometry. Detection creates warning time. Detection forces attacking forces to commit additional assets to suppression and jamming. Detection, in other words, is not a tactical solution, but it is a strategic complication that reshapes how every future mission into Iranian airspace must be planned and executed. American planners in February 2026 were working against a backdrop where the situation had changed materially since June 2025. Iran had absorbed the June 2025 strikes. They reconstituted much of what it could, and with Chinese technical assistance was in the process of rebuilding its sensor and air defense architecture with better Chinese technology woven into the existing framework. The negotiating pressure from Washington had not resolved the nuclear question. The Trump administration had been demanding constraints on Iran's civilian nuclear program and a unilateral curtailment of its ballistic missile capabilities that Tehran showed no indication of accepting. And Iran's ballistic missiles had struck Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar in retaliation for Midnight Hammer, demonstrating that despite the damage absorbed, Tehran retained both the will and the means to reach out and touch American infrastructure at range. Into this context, 11 F-22 Raptors landed at Ovda. The message was being sent before the first sortie was ever flown. Around 30 F-35s from the 48th Fighter Wing at Lakenheath and the Vermont Air National Guard's 158th Fighter Wing were already deployed to a base outside Israel. A squadron of F-15E Strike Eagles from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina had arrived in the region. More F-35s and F-15ES had landed at Lakenheath on February 26, 2026, widely understood as a staging stop for onward movement to the Middle East. KC-46 and KC-135 refueling tankers were converging on Ben Gurion International Airport. Two American carrier strike groups were operating in waters surrounding Iran. The force posture building in February 2026 represented, according to analysts, the largest American military concentration in the region since the 2003 Iraq War. Retired Lieutenant General David Deptula, who helped design the air campaign for Desert Storm and now leads the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies, put it plainly. Yes, the F-22 deployment, he said, indicates preparation for a more aggressive stance toward Iran and signals that the United States is serious about attacking if Iran does not agree to American terms. You do not send F-22 Raptors, he might have added, for routine exercises. America has never, in the 20 years the Raptor has been operational, sent even a single example to a foreign partner's soil. Not for red flag exercises in Australia. Not for NATO operations in Europe in the early deployments. Not even before June 2025 to Israel. To send them now in this number to this location with this supporting cast of tankers and strike aircraft, says something that no official statement could communicate with equivalent clarity. But the question of what these aircraft would actually be doing at Ovda in the days following their arrival is where the story becomes genuinely revealing about the nature of modern air warfare. Because the F-22, extraordinary as it is, has limitations when operating from Israel. Iran's western border, the nearest point of Iranian territory to Israeli airspace, requires crossing either Syria and Iraq or a long circuitous route over the Gulf. Even with tanker support, the F-22's range on internal fuel is constrained by the aircraft's enormous fuel consumption. On its AN/APG-77 radar and ALR-94 electronic warfare system were designed for within visual range and beyond visual range air combat, and for deep suppression of enemy air defenses. But unlike the F-35, the F-22 carries no air-to-ground missiles. Its offensive strike capability is limited to JDAM precision bombs, and its primary air-to-air loadout of AIM-120AM, RAAMS, and AIM-9X Sidewinders. For the kind of sustained intelligence collection missions that require penetrating deep into an adversary's electromagnetic interior, the F-22's sensor fusion platform is extraordinary. For attacking hardened ground targets, the B-2 and F-35 are more capable. So what are the F-22s for? They are for exactly what they are. They are a statement of air superiority that cannot be made by any other platform. If American forces are going to operate in Iranian airspace again, whether in a suppression of enemy air defenses role, an intelligence collection role, or an escort role for B-2 strike packages, they need to do so in the knowledge that the opponent's fighters cannot contest them. Iran's MiG-29 fleet, estimated at around 25 aircraft before the June 2025 conflict, suffered significant losses during Israeli strikes on Iranian air bases. The F-14 fleet, already critically degraded before Midnight Hammer, yet was further devastated by Israeli precision strikes in June 2025. Iran had been negotiating with Russia for Su-35 flanker fighters as a replacement, but those deliveries had not materialized through the end of 2025, with reports suggesting aircraft originally built for Egypt and never transferred had been diverted elsewhere. Iran's credible fighter threat in early 2026 was severely diminished. Its air defense missile network, already shown to be porous and poorly integrated by the June 2025 strikes, was being rebuilt with Chinese assistance. The Bavar 3732 batteries and whatever YLC-8B radar units had been delivered represented the leading edge of a modernization program that was still very much in progress. Into this incomplete defensive network, against an air force with almost no capable interceptors, the United States had now positioned its single most capable air superiority platform on an Allied runway, and I'm backed by dozens of additional fifth-generation aircraft and tanker support that could sustain operations for an extended period. Let us talk about what the F-22 is capable of, because understanding it explains why the Iranians know they are looking at a problem they cannot solve with the tools currently available to them. The Raptor's ALR-94 electronic warfare system is one of the most sophisticated electronic intelligence gathering systems ever installed in a fighter aircraft. It is capable of passively detecting, identifying, and building precise libraries of radar emissions across the electromagnetic spectrum without ever turning on the aircraft's own active radar. The aircraft can fly deep into an adversary's air defense network, listen to everything the network is broadcasting, characterize every radar frequency, every pulse interval, every data link signature, and record it all without ever announcing its presence. This is not a secondary capability. For American intelligence gathering on adversary air defense networks, the F-22's ability to penetrate where satellites cannot and where conventional intelligence collection aircraft would be vulnerable is operationally irreplaceable. The aircraft's AN/APG-77 AESA radar, when active, can detect and track targets at ranges that no Iranian aircraft radar can currently match. Its combination of speed, the Raptor is capable of supercruise, meaning it can sustain supersonic flight without afterburner, and maneuverability, which remains unmatched at any altitude or airspeed combination, means that an adversary who finds himself inside the same airspace as an F-22 has already, in a real sense, lost. The engagement is decided not at the moment of missile launch, but at the moment the F-22 pilot chooses to engage. Everything that happens after that choice is geometry, physics, and countermeasures that the Raptor's electronic warfare suite has been designed from the ground up to defeat. This is the fundamental asymmetry that defines any encounter between the Raptor and anything currently flying in Iranian Air Force colors. Iran knows this, which is why their investment in detection capability, the Bavar 3732's upgraded passive sensors, the Chinese YLC-8B radar, on the layered architecture designed to catch fragmentary returns from low observable platforms, is not really about shooting F-22s down. Not yet. It is about the intelligence value of detecting them, knowing they are there, knowing where they are going, building a picture of how they operate and what routes they prefer, and where the gaps in their mission profiles might be exploited by longer-range surface-to-air missiles, even without a weapons-quality targeting solution. Detection is not destruction, but detection is the first step toward developing the capability to potentially threaten platforms that currently operate with effective impunity. And Tehran is investing in detection capability as rapidly as its technical resources and its Chinese partners will allow. The Chinese role in this story cannot be understated or set aside as peripheral. China's delivery of the YLC-8B to Iran in the weeks following the June 2025 conflict represents exactly the kind of indirect strategic competition that Beijing prefers. China did not fire a shot in June 2025. China is not going to fire a shot in whatever comes next, but China is rebuilding Iran's eyes, restoring its early warning network, integrating its sensor grid with Chinese navigation systems, replacing compromised Iranian software with hardened Chinese alternatives, and providing the diplomatic cover at the United Nations that allows Tehran to absorb pressure without fully collapsing. The Chinese YLC-8B transfer is not a charitable act. It is a calculated investment in keeping Iran viable as a strategic problem for the United States, which is exactly what Beijing wants at a moment when the American military's attention to the Pacific is already stretched. During the June 2025 India-Pakistan conflict, Chinese intelligence provided Pakistan with real-time targeting data, J-10CE and J-17 fighter aircraft, PL-15 air-to-air missiles, and HQ-9 air defense systems. The Beidou navigation satellite system was used to complete Pakistani kill chain operations against Indian forces. In the Middle East context, China is playing a similar supporting role for Iran, one step removed from the direct conflict, providing the enabling technology that makes Iran's military machine more capable of surviving the next engagement. And the publication of annotated satellite imagery showing 11 F-22 Raptors at Avda Air Base within 24 hours of their arrival was not accidental. That was a message from Beijing to Washington, delivered in the language of surveillance imagery and social media. We see you, and we want you to know we see you. And we want Tehran to know it too. The strategic calculus in the region as February 2026 progressed was therefore deeply layered. On one side, the United States and Israel with the most powerful air power package ever assembled in the Middle East, including the F-22's first ever deployment to Israeli soil, backed by carrier strike groups, tanker fleets, and decades of planning for operations against Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure. On the other side, an Iranian military that had absorbed devastating strikes 8 months earlier was rebuilding with Chinese assistance, retained significant ballistic missile capability that it had demonstrated it would use against American bases, and was in the early stages of integrating new sensor technology that it hoped would begin to close the detection gap with American stealth platforms. Between these two sides, a diplomatic track that had been grinding forward in Muscat and other venues, with American demands for nuclear constraints and Iranian demands for sanctions relief and security guarantees that Washington was not prepared to deliver in the form Tehran required. Now let us return to the operator at the Bavar 3732 console at 2:31 in the morning. He has a fragmentary return. Not enough for a weapons quality track. Not enough to hand off to a missile battery with any confidence of a successful engagement. But enough. Enough to say something is there. Enough to pick up the phone and start a chain of events that has been rehearsed dozens of times in the months since Midnight Hammer. Because Iranian air defense commanders had spent those months wargaming exactly this scenario. Something has gotten past the outer envelope. Something is already inside. What do you do? The answer, in this hypothetical that is grounded in the very real technical realities of early 2026, reveals everything about the nature of the confrontation that is unfolding. Yeah, you scramble whatever you have. But what does Iran have? After June 2025, after the Israeli strikes on Iranian air bases, after the destruction of the Persian Tomcats on the Mehrabad apron, and the precision strikes on the 8th Tactical Fighter Base near Isfahan, the realistic number of airworthy F-14, as remaining in Iranian service hovers somewhere between 5 and 10. These aircraft have been kept alive through heroic improvisation. Iranian engineers have made over 300 modifications to the F-14's original Grumman design, adapting it, reverse engineering components, fabricating replacements for parts that cannot be sourced anywhere on Earth, because the United States deliberately destroyed surplus Tomcat spares after the Navy's 2006 retirement, specifically to prevent them from reaching Iran. A single F-14A overhaul costs approximately $3 million and takes up to 42,000 man-hours of labor. Some airframes have spent years in storage, cannibalized for parts to keep others flying, before being rebuilt at enormous expense and effort. This is the aircraft Iran has available to intercept something that appears on its radar as a ghost. Something that is there and then not there, present and then dissolved, a contact that the system's software cannot resolve into a solid track because the target's radar cross-section is doing things that the radar's algorithms were not designed to handle. The F-14A, even in its modified Iranian configuration with the Facur 90 missile, Iran's reverse-engineered and rebuilt version of the AIM-54 Phoenix, the longest-range air-to-air missile ever fielded on a production fighter aircraft, carries the AWG-9 weapons control system, a mechanically scanned array that was state-of-the-art when it was designed in the 1960s. The AWG-9 is powerful. Its range against conventional targets is impressive even by modern standards. But it was not designed to track targets with the radar cross-section of an F-22. The Raptor presents a radar return approximately the size of a steel marble when viewed from the front, and its electronic warfare suite actively works to exploit exactly the kind of mechanically scanned radar that the AWG-9 represents, creating false returns, breaking lock, steering the radar's tracking logic toward empty air while the aircraft itself slides quietly through another sector of sky. So the Iranian crew that scrambles into the night, responding to a fragmentary contact that their ground radar can barely characterize, is chasing something they cannot lock. Their radar warning receiver tells them nothing, because the F-22, in its passive intelligence collection mode, is not actively radiating. It is listening. It is watching them. It has had a complete electronic picture of their radar characteristics, their data link frequencies, their missile guidance frequencies since before they left the ground. The moment they activate their fire control radar and begin a targeting run, the F-22's electronic warfare system has already begun building the countermeasure package it will deploy if they fire. This is not a fair fight. It is not designed to be. It is a confrontation between 50 years of American investment in stealth, electronic warfare, and sensor fusion, and an Air Force that has been sustaining 40-year-old aircraft on improvised parts and ingenuity while cut off from the global arms market by the most comprehensive sanctions regime in history. And yet, the Iranians scramble. They climb. They push their throttles forward and scan their scopes and press toward a contact that won't hold still. Because what else do they do? The alternative is to acknowledge that their airspace is not theirs, that something is flying through it, and they cannot stop it, and they cannot catch it, and they cannot even properly see it. Pride matters. Doctrine matters. The orders from the command post matter. Get between it and the border. Force a confrontation on Iranian terms. Even a confrontation where you cannot win a technical engagement is a confrontation where you demonstrate that the age of unchallenged penetration carries a cost. The Fakur 90 missiles come off the rails. They ignite and race toward a targeting solution that is imperfect, built on a fragmentary track and a crew that knows they are firing with less than ideal geometry, but fires anyway because probability is not zero, and sometimes probability is enough. And this is where the 11 seconds that define everything happen. From the moment Iranian missiles go active in their terminal homing phase, the F-22's electronic warfare suite begins a response that is not a broad jamming sweep. It is not the crude electromagnetic shouting that older jamming systems use. It is surgical, precise. The ALR-94 has spent the entire intercept building a library of exactly what frequencies the Fokker 90's active radar homing seeker uses, exactly what pulse characteristics it broadcasts as it searches for its target. The jamming response is calibrated to those specific frequencies, injecting interference at precisely the parameters the seeker's algorithms need to function. At the same time, timed chaff packages burst into the sky at computed intervals, creating false returns that the missile's guidance cannot distinguish from a real aircraft. The Fakor 90 was built to defeat the countermeasures of 1970s technology. It is meeting countermeasures built in the 21st century by engineers who had access to the entire body of knowledge accumulated by the American electronic warfare community across 5 decades of continuous development. The missile turns. It chases a ghost. Its proximity fuse triggers on a cloud of metallic chaff. The warhead detonates on nothing. The other missile loses guidance and flies ballistic, tracing a long arc through the Iranian night before impacting empty ground. The F-22 is already at the border, and now, from the west, new contacts appear on the Iranian crew's radar. Not in the clear, not the clean, solid, trackable returns that conventional aircraft present. The same maddening, flickering, low observable signature that they have been failing to lock for the past 30 minutes, now coming from the opposite direction, and these are not alone. Behind them, at ranges their sensors cannot fully characterize, the electromagnetic noise that fills their radar warning receiver tells them they are being illuminated by systems they cannot localize. The F-35s from the carrier strike group have been airborne for an hour. They have been holding a combat air patrol position far to the west, in the international airspace of the Eastern Mediterranean, since the intelligence mission began. When the missile shots were detected, they went to full military power and turned east. They covered the distance in minutes because F-35s may not be as fast as an F-14 at maximum speed. They are already at combat altitude and already at the right energy state, and already carrying full air-to-air weapons loads with targeting solutions built on sensor fusion data that the Iranian crew cannot access and cannot counter. The message the 2 F-35 pilots deliver in this moment is not spoken in any language. It is delivered entirely in physics. Closing geometry, energy state, the empty Fokker 90 launch rails, the fuel margin, the certainty, settling in across both cockpits of the Iranian fighters that if these F-35 pilots choose to engage, there is no answer available to the F-14 crews that will produce a different outcome. The mathematics is merciless. The Tomcat pilots break south and run for home. The F-35s throttle back. They do not pursue across the border. They hold their position and watch the returns fade toward the airbase. The message has been delivered without a single additional weapon being fired. We were here. Yum, we had you. We chose not to. And you know it. And you will think about it. And every calculation you make going forward will include this moment. There is a particular coldness to this kind of message. A threat issued in full voice with all weapons deployed and all capabilities demonstrated, and then withdrawn without consequence. Not because of restraint born from weakness, but because the restraint itself is the most powerful statement available. The pilot who chooses not to fire when he could have fired is making a point that no fired missile can ever make. He is saying, this is not the limit of what I can do. This is the limit of what I need to do right now. By the time the Raptors are crossing back over the border, Iranian state media's coverage apparatus is already running its own version of events. Fighters scrambled. Intruders challenged, sovereignty defended. Given the language of face-saving and domestic narrative management that every government uses when the alternative is to acknowledge in public what happened in private. Washington says nothing. This is its own kind of answer. The silence of a superpower that does not need to explain itself. But the strategic picture the episode leaves behind, in the context of February 2026 and the unprecedented American force buildup around Iran, is not comfortable for anyone watching it unfold. Iran has demonstrated in recent months a genuine and growing capability to detect fifth-generation aircraft under specific conditions. The original Bavar 373's fire control radar is assessed to be capable of detecting targets with a radar cross-section of approximately 0.01 square meters at roughly 82 kilometers, within the detection range necessary to begin generating a weapons-quality track on stealth platforms at certain aspects. The Bavar 3732's upgrades have extended this envelope. The Chinese YLC-8B, if the reports of its delivery and deployment are accurate, represents a different category of capability entirely, exploiting UHF band physics to detect targets that X-band fire control radars cannot see at all. Iran is building the first layer of a genuinely layered anti-stealth sensor architecture. But detection without an interceptor capable of acting on that detection, and detection without a missile system capable of generating a weapons-quality track from a fragmentary surveillance return, is not yet a viable counter to fifth-generation air power. The gap between seeing and killing remains vast. And the June 2025 conflict demonstrated in the most direct possible way that Iranian integrated air defense systems are more brittle than their parade footage suggests. The Center for Non-Proliferation Studies analysis, conducted before Midnight Hammer and later validated by the operation's outcome, found that Iranian Air Defense Command and Control was poorly networked, with significant gaps between early warning sensors and surface-to-air missile batteries that created delays and coordination failures when facing rapidly developing threats. Israel's strikes in June 2025 destroyed early warning radars in the opening rounds. ICE then systematically worked through the air defense architecture with the kind of coordinated multi-domain suppression that modern stealth-capable air forces are specifically designed to execute. Rebuilding that architecture with Chinese radar systems and Bavar 3732 improvements is a real modernization program. But modernization takes time.